about a really good writer who was a star in the 70s. And we're going to talk about his childhood and how he became a world champion. He was a United States champion, but before that, he was just a high school kid. And we're going to talk about Bruce the Fox Penhall today. And I had a chance to interview him a while back and kind of talk about a few things. So we're going to talk a little bit about his life. He told me, like, don't talk a lot about me. Don't like make a lot of shows about me. And of course, we've made lots of shows about a lot of writers. But today we're going to talk a little bit about Penhall's early days, my experiences with Bruce when he was only 18 years old. He's an old guy now, and he was a really good writer. And, you know, he started off as just a young kid. His father was sponsoring, one of many sponsors of the Rocket, Rick Woods. Now, in the early 70s, Rick Woods was a star. You know, he was a great writer, and he was the top writer at Costa Mesa before Mike Bass took his throne away. But Rick Woods was a star, and Penhall's dad, he went ahead and sponsored him. I'm going to sit down here. I was in the jungle, and my reception wasn't very good, so I had to cut that show. Hopefully, this is going to be better. But Penhall got introduced to Speedway through his papa, who was a boat racer and an airplane racer. So there was a lot of racing blood in Penhall's family. And Penhall's dad, he boat raced against Dennis Segalos' dad. And they were arch rivals, and then they became best friends through competition. And they had a lot of things in common. So the Penhalls and Segaloses would get together and hang out and play cards, probably party a little bit, hang out. And then Bruce and Dennis would hang out also, and they would like just hang out together. So that's kind of how Bruce got into speedways, through his papa and then Rick Woods. And now I talked to Dennis about Rick Woods, and also I talked to Penhall about Rick Woods, and they didn't really like hang out with Rick Woods much. It's just Rick Woods was just like being sponsored by the papa. But these boys, they got a charge out of Speedway, like who wouldn't? And they went ahead and they had Ed Schaefer build them a little McCullough mini bike, like out of a lawnmower engine or something like that. And, you know, Dennis's dad and Bruce's dad had a lot of money. They were pretty well off. And Dennis's dad built a little speedway track the size of Costa Mesa. They had George Wynn build the starting gates. And they, as young boys, Bruce and Dennis, they were racing together on these little McCullough, probably like 50s motorcycles that Ed Schaefer built. And it was, they got to really develop on the speedway track, and they had many years of racing together and stuff. And I talked to both Dennis and Bruce about it, and I asked them, like, who won between you? Because I know if you get Bruce Penhall and Dennis Segalos together, you're going to have some competitive races. But they said they didn't really race a lot, and they weren't too focused on racing. But that's kind of hard to believe, right? But I'm sure that Bruce probably got the better of Dennis because he was 2 or 3 years older than Dennis, and he was physically stronger than Dennis, and they were just young kids at the time. But they had lots of laps together and lots of practice. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why both those riders became champions the way they were, because of the practice and the dedication and time and the money that was spent building the track and so forth. So they had lots of practice time. They had lots of time to get together and do lots of fun stuff together as kids and develop that friendship. Till this day, they're both good friends, and they're both really good people as well. But Bruce went ahead, and when he turned 16, he had his first race. I believe it was at Irwindale Raceway. And Bruce Penhall was like, they're all of us. He started out in D3, and then he went ahead and just cleaned everybody's clocks in D3. He looked like a D1 rider his first time out. Why? Because all those years of practicing, and he had got the 500s and was practicing. So Penhall was really ready for Division One right off the bat. And then he went to Division Two, Bruce did, and Bruce went ahead and started cleaning their clocks. And he was a D1 rider for sure. And he went ahead and quickly advanced through the ranks from D3 to D2. Now, D2 is the intermediate riders of Speedway, and they're pretty good. But when you get to Division One, that's where you have the top riders. And that's where Bruce was destined to go to D1. And he moved very fast to D1. And he was racing all the stars. And, you know, one of his races he had, his first races, was against the Rocket, Rick Woods. And I'm sure that Bruce had a lot of sort of nervousness because Rick Woods was his idol growing up. And now quickly, Bruce Penhall is racing the Rocket Rick Woods. You know, so it was kind of nervous because, you know, one day he was cheering for Rick Woods and the next day he's trying to beat Rick Woods. So it's quite the experience going from spectator to competitor and trying to beat that guy. But that's exactly what happened. And I'm sure Penhall had some really successful races against the Rocket. And that was really good. But Dennis couldn't race D1 or D2 or D3 until a couple years later in 75. As a matter of fact, one of my first D3 races, I raced against Dennis. We're both on the program together at Costa Mesa. So when Dennis was getting a little older, a couple years later, me and Dennis had our first races together in D3. And Bruce Penhall at that time was already an established star, and he made his first Speedway Nationals at that time, racing the Los Angeles Coliseum. He didn't do particularly great at that time. I think he got like 5 points or 7 points, but he made his first Nationals, and he made his mark along with Bobby Boogaloo Schwartz at the same time at the Los Angeles Coliseum. Now, Penhall, he became a really famous rider in part thanks to Larry Huffman, the announcer, because Larry really took a liking to Penhall. He told me in one of my interviews with Larry, and Larry just recently passed away. Rest in peace, Larry Huffman. But Bruce and Larry became good friends, and Larry taught Bruce all about announcing, and it just was a good relationship between Penhall and Huffman. And Huffman went ahead and gave Bruce the nickname, the Fox. Bruce, the Fox, Penhall. And every time Larry Huffman said that, the crowd would go crazy. And Penhall will go out there and put on a show for the people at Costa Mesa. So Larry Huffman kind of promoted Bruce Penhall, is what Bruce told me, kind of to be a star in Speedway. Now, of course, Bruce had riding skill to become a star. So when you have the announcer pumping you up and you have the ability that God gave you to be a great racer, both of those together, you're going to have a really good success. Plus, Bruce Penhall was probably the best looking Speedway rider at that and racing. Now, in his early days, his father was nervous because Bruce was growing up so fast, and his father had a lot of money. He had the Penhall Concrete Company, and he was pretty well. He had a good friend who was like a sergeant or a lieutenant for the Anaheim Police Department, I believe. And he told this guy, he said, you know, my son's like 16 and I want him to be safe, and I want to make sure, like, you know, he doesn't get in trouble, because Bruce was a little bit of a a fun, loving guy. And so Bruce's dad hired this police guy to watch Bruce in the pits and after the races, which probably was a bummer, right? To have a policeman watching you. So Bruce was well taken care of as a young person. His fame came fast. His glory came fast. His speedway ability came fast. Everything for Penhall came great and in line. Penhall was the golden boy for sure. And it was really kind of fun watching him advance. And, you know, you think when you see a guy like Penhall, you think, oh, he's so lucky. You know, he has this great life and everything's perfect. Lots of stuff in Penhall's life was really good. But just like all of us, we're all human and we all have our good times and our bad times. Life goes up and life goes down for all of us. So, you know, things can be bad and they can take turn for the worse. So not everything in Penhall's life was roses and perfume and flowers. He had some difficult times too. For example, in '75, his family went on a ski trip, I believe, to Mammoth Mountain. That's in like central Northern California. And his dad was an airplane racer and they had airplanes. So he flew his wife, Mr. Penhall, and Mrs. Segalos went skiing. I believe it was Mrs. Segalos. And they went up to Mammoth Mountain and they had a wonderful ski trip. They asked Bruce if he wanted to go skiing because I'm sure Bruce would have had a great time. But Bruce was kind of trying out for baseball, I read at the time. I'm not sure if that's just true, but I read that somewhere. And Bruce said, no, I want to practice my baseball. I want to try to make the baseball team at Newport Harbor High School is where he attended high school. So Bruce stayed home. He didn't go to the ski trip and he worked on his baseball skills. He did not need to work on his speedway skills because Bruce was a good racer. So anyways, the tragedy happened in 1975 when Bruce's mom and dad and Dennis's mom, they were flying the airplane home from the mountains and they probably hit bad weather or turbulence. That, you know, there's very rough area as far as lots of mountains, lots of dangerous places there to fly. And I had other friends crash and have that passed away in those areas also. And same with the Penhalls, Mr. and Mrs. Penhall and Mrs. Segalos, they had an airplane crash and they passed away. And Bruce was only a young guy at like 18 and it must have been tragic, you know. So Bruce had his share of downs and losing your mom and dad and seeing Dennis's mom die, that's had to have been horribly tragic for the young boys, both Dennis and Bruce. And it really left the Penhall family in shambles, especially because they had a young kids. They were just young kids. Bruce had a sister, has a sister still. We're friends. And also has, I think, an older brother. And all three of them became like they didn't have a parent no more. So it was very sad and very tragic. And Bruce kind of dedicated his life to Speedway at that time, you know. He lost the things that were very important to him, which is his family, his parents. And he made a vow to himself that he would really work hard to, you know, continue his racing and dedicate it to his parents. And that year, Penhall went to Europe and watched the World Championship and saw how exciting it was. I believe it was at Wembley. There was like 90,000 screaming fans, and Penhall saw the lights and saw the action, saw the people, the money, everything that was involved in Speedway in the UK at the time. And Bruce was like, you know, I got to get out of California, leave the surfer, the sunshine, the warm weather, the house in Balboa. You know, I lost my parents I think I want to go racing speedway. So Bruce was starting to gear up to go to England at this time to race. He had an intention of winning a world championship. You know, Bruce just has that blood, that championship blood, probably from his papa, who was a gifted racer as well. So Bruce was kind of going in that direction. And another lucky break that Bruce had was when in '76, the next year after his parents passed away, they had the team racing in Speedway. It was called the National Speedway League. It was only for 1 year. And where they duplicated the British League, where they like the team racing, but they like to see all the stars racing at the same night. So that was the big beef about the team racing. And Bruce Penhall was on a team like Bass called the Los Angeles Sprockets. And they had a good team. They ended up finishing second place in the league. And Bruce got a lot of tips from Mike Bass, because back in those days, the riders just did not share a lot of tips with each other because they're competing for so much money. So it was kind of doggy dog, and sometimes people were fighting each other, and it wasn't very friendly, let's say, because of the money, and everyone was trying to get a hold of the money. So, but because of the team racing, Bass took Penhall under his wings and start teaching him many things that he didn't know, because Bass learned all these things from Ivan Major in 1968 at the Whiteman Stadium. So Penhall was caught some lucky breaks there by getting tutored by one of the greatest American speedway riders ever, which was Michael Bass. And at the end of the season, Michael Bass, he had the top points. I think it was like 12.5 out of a possible, something like that. And also Penhall had like 11.5 points. He finished second place in the entire league. All the racers and all the teams, Penhall finished second, which was unbelievable for an 18-year-old, fairly new speedway rider. And Bass, he finished first place, and he was really a great rider. So that was kind of like the lucky break that Penhall had of learning so much from Michael the Machine Bass. So that was really great, really lucky break for Penhall. And then Penhall, he just said that he didn't really have much more to do in the United States. He did have a Speedway Nationals with Bass, and he used all that stuff, the techniques that Bass taught him. And Penhall just barely lost the United States Speedway Nationals because Bass was so good. But Penhall wasn't far behind. Also, Penhall was so young. It was amazing how well Bruce did for being such a young rider. So Bruce was definitely 100% on his way to stardom. So that was exciting for Bruce in his career. And of course, later he went to Europe and became a two-time world champion in '81 and '82. But we're talking about Penhall before he went to England racing today on this live stream show. We're at the beach. It's nice. It's a beautiful day today. But I was going to tell you a couple stories that happened with me and Penhall, because the same year that Penhall's parents had passed away was my first year of racing speedway. And I mentioned that I had raced my first D3 race with Dennis Segalos, but I had only ridden a speedway bike for a week or two. So I really didn't know really how to ride a speedway bike very well. And Dennis was a D1 rider at the time. I really wanted to beat Dennis. And I remember seeing Dennis when we were just like 12 years old. We're like the same age. And I was delivering papers, saving for a speedway bike. And Dennis had already been winning main events at the OCIR and practicing with Bruce. And Dennis was a star rider as well. He was a little bit maybe younger than Bruce, so his development was a little bit lower than Bruce's because of the age, not the ability. And I remember seeing Dennis's picture winning a main event at the OCIR in the paper. I was reading the Orange County Register. Do you remember the Orange County Register? And I couldn't believe it because I was reading about Sagalos, and I'm like, hey, he's the same age as me, and he's winning main events, and I'm delivering newspapers, right? So we have a few comments. Thank you so much. And I hope you're enjoying the show. So I cut the clipping out, and I still have that clipping of Sagalos as a 12-year-old. He was just a little guy, and he's racing against these kind of big dudes on 500s. And Dennis was the size of like, very small, let's say. I don't want to say any bad words. But Dennis was a shrimpy guy. And he was beating these big, heavy dudes. And it was hilarious. Dennis showed me those pictures when we did a live stream. But Dennis was just an awesome rider. And then when we had our first D3 races together, when he finally became 16, I got myself on the program finally at the Costa Mesa. And I looked on the program, and I was on the 0-yard line my first race. I wasn't very good. Like I said, I was only a week or two on a speedway bike. I had the 22-inch back tire. Everything was wrong on my bike. But who cares? I was on a speedway bike. I had no gloves. It was just like wanting to be there. You know, I wanted to be a part of it, even though I wasn't really like Dennis Sagalos, you know, a seasoned rider at all. But I saw Dennis in the pits right before my race, and Dennis had like a beautiful white pair of, I think it was ABC leathers, and it was orange letters. Like, I think his father's company was like Orange County Catering Service. And it kind of looked like Penhall's uniform, but a little different, but similar. And he had a beautiful uniform, and I had a really horrible used pair of leathers from Ron Taylor that was too small. I was 6'1" back then. I'm 6'1" now, and Ron Taylor's like 5'7". So he was kind of a little guy. And so these leathers didn't fit me. They're like, I was tight. I couldn't move my arms. So it was very difficult for me to race. And the leathers were like old leathers. They were junky leathers. I bought them for like $50 because in those days you had to have leathers to race. If you didn't have leathers, you can't race. And you had to have your name on them and your number. So I didn't have enough money to have my name put on the leathers. So I got duct tape, and I duct taped Brian on the front and my last name and duct tape on the back. And I had no gloves on, like I mentioned. And I didn't care because, you know, I was racing speedway. And then I look over and I see Dennis Sagalos over there. He was kind of in the pits right across from me. And he looked like $1 million, you know. Dennis Sagalos, he looked great. He wore those beautiful brand new ABC leathers. It was sparkling. And we were racing our first race together. And I looked and wanted to kick your ass so bad. I saw how nice you looked and how, you know, how I knew that you were a good rider. And I was like, I want that guy. But you know what? It was like impossible for me to beat this guy because I had no seat time. And Dennis had like 4 years of seat time. So he was pretty much an established D1 rider in D3. But I didn't care. I wanted that guy. And Dennis said, that's the way to do it. You know, have that attitude. Like, you know, you want to kick my ass? Well, good. That's what a racer wants. They want to beat the other racer. And I wanted Dennis something horrible. But I didn't have the skill at all to beat him. And the race started, and I was beating Dennis the first time, the first turn. And I was coming out of turn 2 at Costa Mesa. I was on the 0. Dennis was on the 10. And I'm like, woohoo, I'm beating Sagalos. I'm beating Dennis. I'm going to kick his ass. And I was just so happy. And then Dennis on the outside of me went, oh, he just blew by me. He beat the shit out of me. I'm like, what? I was like, faster, Brian. as fast as I wanted to go, I couldn't catch that guy. And he beat me in that race. He won that main event. He went to D1 almost immediately after that. But it was kind of a fun story, you know. And then that off season, I had some practice and lessons from Dub Farrell, and I got sponsored by Jerry Fairchild, who was the top engine builder at that time with Ed Schaefer. And I got my bike going fast, and I got to practice learning how to race because I didn't practice at all. And I advanced to D1 the following year. It took me a few weeks to progress through D2 to D1. And my first race in D1, I opened the program and I saw Rick Woods, who was one of my all-time favorites since I was like 12 years old, you know, going in the stands. And then I saw Bruce Penhall was in my race too. So I'm like, oh, great. My first division race. I get Rick Woods and I got Bruce the Fox Penhall. This really sucks. And I said, you know, Brian, you got to go for these guys. So I know how Penhall felt when he raced against Rick Woods, because when you idolize somebody and then you got to race against them, it's kind of weird, you know, and you feel kind of intimidated a little bit. But you know, deep down inside as a racer, you got to let go of that fear and that intimidation. And you have to just treat them like, you know, any other racer, kind of like they're your enemy and you want to beat their asses. And that's exactly what I thought of when I raced Penhall. I got a lot better after an off season of practice. And I was on the 0 or 10 yard line. So, and Penhall was at the 40 or 50. So that wasn't fair, right? And the race started and I kind of like was in the lead the whole time. It was at Costa Mesa and nobody was like around me. I was going pretty fast. It was like a 6-lap race. And the last lap, I was pretty excited. I'm like, I'm beating Penhall and I'm beating Woods. I was thinking that in my mind. This is pretty awesome. My first D1 race, and I'm cleaning these guys out. And then on turn 3, that was turn 1 and 2. And then turn 3, I had a bobble. I hit a hole and my bike just kind of jumped. And the next thing I saw is Penhall racing around the outside of me. And I'm like, oh my God. And I gassed it as hard as I could. I was still riding pretty fast, but I just gassed it as hard as I could. And then at the finish line, I looked down because he was on the outside of me. And he beat me by like that much. It was by a whisker. I could see it. And I was so mad at myself because I gave Penhall that race by bobbling the last lap. I think I got too excited. And that was really a bummer for me. I was mad. And then I started thinking, well, Penhall is a good rider, so don't be too mad. I did beat Rick Woods, so, you know, 1 out of 2 ain't too bad. And Penhall was a hot rider, and he was fast as lightning. But then I thought to myself, well, this is my first D1 rider race, and Penhall beat me, which was respectable for sure. And so I said, just be a good sport, Brian, and then go ahead and shake Penhall's hand. So we were at turn 1 and 2 at Costa Mesa, and I thought, now I'm racing the big time, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give a high five to Bruce Penhall. So we kind of were next to each other at the time. So I said, good race, Bruce, and I gave him a high five. And Bruce came up to me. He was kind of hunting me down. I thought he was going to give me a high five. And he kicked my bike. He was on the sort of inside of me. He kicked the bike, and then he like pushed me or whatever. And I go flying down. We're going about 5 miles an hour. And I go crashing into the ground. And I'm laying on the ground going, what the hell just happened? I went to shake Penhall's hand, and next thing I know, he's dumping me. And I was like, this is like bullshit, you know? And I was like freaking out a little bit, but it didn't hurt me. And then I thought, no, just don't do anything. It's Bruce Penhall. Like, just let it go, because Bruce is famous and I'm not, and I don't want to make waves. I don't want Bruce to hate me, and I'm a new writer, so who am I to be going up to a star writer and making a fight? So I said, just let it go. No harm. I was pretty cool about it. I don't like to fight anyways, guys. So anyways, I picked my bike up and I was walking in the pits, and all I could hear is my sister yelling, "Why did you do that? Why did you dump my brother?" And my sister was yelling at Penhall and screaming. I could hear like a cat fight going on. And Penhall was yelling at my sister. My sister was yelling at Penhall. And my sister was my pit woman, not man. And she was very beautiful. And all the Speedway riders liked her, including Wild Bill Cody. They're all like, "You have a sexy sister." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And she was pretty hot looking for the riders, but she's my sister, so she didn't really do much for me. But the riders liked my sister. So here's my sister like defending me, and thank you, Debbie, for that. And she's in a cat fight with Penhall, and they're fighting, and I ran up to my sister and grabbed her. I said, "Debbie, that's Bruce Penhall. Leave him alone. Don't hurt him. That's little Bruce Penhall." And my sister was, I think, a little taller than Bruce. Bruce is not really the tallest guy on the block, but that helped him as his racing to be small, I think. But anyways, I pulled my sister away from Bruce, and I said, "Don't hurt Penhall and just leave him alone. Leave Bruce Penhall alone." And my sister finally did. I drug her back to my pits, and as I was dragging my sister, Debbie, back, Bruce said, like, "You tell your brother to tighten his chain guard next time." And I said, "What?" And Bruce is yelling, "His chain guard almost hit me in the head." And that's why Bruce dumped me, is because he was so mad. And I looked down on my bike. I had an old JP. My big, heavy metal chain guard was missing. And I'm like, "Oh my God, my chain guard either hit Penhall." That my chain guard, I never was the best mechanic, I must admit. It's my mistake. I take the blame for it. And I told Penhall during our live stream about this story. And Penhall's like, "Really? Really? I did that?" And I go, "Yeah, you were just an 18-year-old punk. We all were 18-year-old punks at one time. And, you were kind of a jerk, but you're a nice guy now." And Bruce apologized. He said, "God, I'm so sorry, if I did that." And I'm like, "Oh, of course you did that, Bruce. I witnessed that. It was not an accident, or it wasn't in my sleep." So anyway, Bruce is a nice guy. And what we do when we're 18 years old and what we do when we're older guys is usually not the same. And our mentality as an 18-year-old kid is usually not the same mentality as an older person, mature and well-seasoned in life. But I thought that was kind of a funny story. And I was shocked that I almost killed Penhall with my chain guard. My first D1 race at Costa Mesa. And he wanted to beat me, and he did. That's why he was so motivated. He was hot. He was so hot. Penhall, he's a good rider. You get that guy mad, and he's double fast. And he nicked me at the line. I was going pretty good too. It was not an easy race for Penhall, but he got me. And it seemed like I had always raced Penhall. I didn't race Segalos that much, but I raced Penhall all the time. When I opened the program, it'd always be like my race in handicap, and there'd be Bruce Penhall on a 40 or 50. And I'm like, "Oh no, not this guy again." I even went up to like the program people. I go, "Why do you hate me so much?" And they say, "Why? We don't hate you." And they say, you always put me with Penhall every night. I go to San Bernardino, I'm with Penhall. I go to Irwindale, I'm with Penhall. Every night I'm with Bruce Penhall. Can you give me a break? And they're laughing. I didn't really like racing Bruce Penhall all the time. He was a little bit hard to beat. I did have a few good rides against him, and he had a few good rides against me too. He was a hot rider. That guy could ride the bike. He was gifted. He was a natural. But one night I got Penhall, and it was really cool. And it was a hard race. Um, it was on a Tuesday night at Ventura. I was racing Division One. I knew I'd have Penhall in my race. I wasn't worried about it. I went to El Medina High School, and my girlfriend at the time, she went to Los Amigos High School in Santa Ana. And I picked her up at lunchtime, and we drove all the way to Ventura. So it was far. I was in Orange County, and it was like 2 or 3 hour drive. I was in my mom's old Pinto station wagon. Those were the good old days. And so I thought I would do something fun before the races. We get there early at Ventura. And I went ahead and packed a very beautiful lunch with a blanket and drinks and food, and wanted a nice like buffet lunch before the races because I knew I was racing that night. So we get to Ventura like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 1 or 2. And so we drove around looking for a place to have the picnic. And I saw these beautiful hills, and they're probably closed nowadays, but they were just open. There was a little barbed wire fence. And I told the girl, I said, let's go have a picnic on top of the hill. It's very romantic and very beautiful. And she said, okay. So I packed all this food and drinks and a blanket, and we walked all the way to the top of this beautiful rolling hill in Ventura. It was really gorgeous. And we laid the blanket out, and we had lots of foods and chips and soft drinks and everything, desserts. We had a beautiful lunch. It was very romantic, and we had a romantic time as well. And after lunch and everything, I was very tired, so I went ahead and fell asleep in the afternoon. And about 5 o'clock, my girlfriend, she's shaking me. I was really tired from the drive and the food and everything. And she said, Brian, wake up. You got to go to the sign-ups. The sign-ups are right now, and so I was like, oh, God, I don't feel good. I'm too tired. So I said, all right, so we packed up the picnic stuff, walked down to the car. I had my Speedway bike in the back of the Pinto station wagon, the old days. And we drove to the racetrack for the sign-ups. And we get there just as the sign-up booth opened. And I felt kind of ashamed. I had this like station wagon with my Speedway bike crossed up, slid in the back. But it got me to the track. And then I'm sitting there, but I'm not feeling very good. I'm very tired, and I just don't feel good, like racing good. And so I told my girlfriend, I think I'm not going to race tonight. I don't really feel good. And she goes, what? We came all the way to Ventura and you don't want to race? She's very mad. And she goes, yo, you're going to race. And I go, no, I want to just go sit down in the stands with you. I never sat in the Ventura stands. I never watched the race. I really wanted to watch races that night. I did not want to race at all. And she goes, no, you will race. So I was like, oh God, I was so upset. I'm like, oh, okay. So I wasn't happy. I knew I was going to be horrible because I felt like shit. And I was just like, and then I'm sitting there getting my bike out ugh. And then I see Kelly Moran and Sean Moran load their vans. Unfortunately, I see Kelly smoking. I always remember him smoking. And I saw all these star riders, Schwartz and Becker and all these star riders. I lost you for a minute. I'm not sure where I lost you, but I was telling you about the time I raced Penhall, and I wasn't feeling well. And the first race came, it's Penhall. Actually, I don't know if Penhall was in that race. And I had won that race. It was my heat race. And then I was like, I don't feel good still. And I really didn't want to race, but I was in the semi because I had won or placed real high in the first race. So I was in the semi event and I felt bad. So I went to the semi race, and I won the semi. And I'm like, what? This is crazy, because I didn't feel good at all. And I'm like, well, how could I win the semi? I was feeling so horrible. And then I won the first race, and then I won the second race. I said, and then all of a sudden after the semi, I felt really great. I'm like, you know, I can win this main. I can win this main. I felt all like rejuvenated. I went from like being walking dead to like getting excited, you know, because I felt good. Like, I guess I woke up finally after sleeping, but I had done really well that night, but I didn't feel very good. So the main event came, and there was all the star riders, and Penhall was in it. And I'm like, Brian, you gotta go, man. These guys are fast. They're gonna be running down your ass real fast. So the race started, and I gave it all I had, you know, and rode a really clean race. Ventura track was perfect for my riding, and I was riding the pole real good. I was riding real fast. I didn't make any mistakes this time, and I'm riding about lap 3, and all of a sudden I hear an engine on my right side in my helmet. And I'm like, oh no, who is this? And I glanced over, and there was Penhall wearing his Los Angeles Sprockets leather uniform, and he was hauling ass near the crash wall. And I'm like, Brian, go faster, dude. And I remember him beating me my first race by a whisker, and Penhall was going for me again. And I'm like, you know what? I was just determined. I had a lot of energy at the time, and I gave it all I had. And Penhall just, I even was pulling on him. He couldn't pass me, and I won that handicap race. And I was very tired though, like exhausted from racing Penhall because of the energy level I had to give to beat that guy. He was so good. And I was really happy though. And we had the trophy girl presentation, and we had the most beautiful trophy girl I've ever seen. She was a gorgeous surfer girl, blonde, beautiful. And I'm like, oh, I like this. And my girlfriend looked at me and she said, Brian, if you kiss that trophy girl, I'm breaking up with you. You do not kiss that girl. And I'm like, oh no. So the trophy presentation came that night, and I did kiss the girl. The girl wanted to kiss me. One of the rare times a trophy girl wanted to kiss me. And I could not kiss the girl. I told her, no, I'm sorry, my girlfriend won't let me kiss you. So, and I was really sad. But my girlfriend was really happy I did not kiss her. And then we drove home, and she was very happy and stuff that I did not kiss the trophy girl. And that was a bummer. But I have pictures, so that's good. I have pictures of me not kissing the girl. And but that was sad. But anyways, but yeah, Penhall was tough competitor, and he was a hard guy to beat. You know, Penhall just was insanely difficult, and you had to be on your A game, and then you're lucky to beat him even on your A game. He was that good. And this was before he went to England. So Penhall was really a star rider and a gifted rider. And I realized, like, if I had gone to England, how competitive, you know, I'd have to be to stay at that level. And I was very tired. I'm like, God, I don't know if I have that energy. You know, it takes just an amazing amount of energy to be that competitive and to be that, you know, to give it everything you have on the track. But it was difficult, and it wasn't easy to beat Penhall, let me tell you. But it was one of the bright moments of my racing career. And it's a story I shall not ever forget, because Penhall was a true champion. But it was a great experience. Penhall was a star of the 70s. We can talk more about his European experiences later. And Bruce, like I said, he said, don't talk about me. And I go, no, I talk about a lot of riders. Actually, Kenny Carter is really one of the popular shows that I do. And Bruce and Kenny, they did not like each other too much in England. And same with Segalos. All the American riders didn't like Carter very much. But Kenny Carter has this huge following even to today. And it's kind of sad how all that happened, but that's it for another show. Let's say that. But thanks for hanging out with us today on the beach, just chilling, talking about the great champion, United States and world champion at that time, future United States champion and future world champion. That was Bruce Penhall. He was amazing, and he had a difficult life. He had challenges he overcame. He was a strong individual, still is to this day. He's a tough cookie. You have to be mentally tough to do what he did. And we commend the abilities, the personality of Bruce Penhall for overcoming all these obstacles and achieving the great success that he achieved. But that's it. We talked about the 70s. They're great times. Kind of sad that Penhall left, though, because he was such a good rider. It'd been fun to see him win more in the United States because he was just a star. But thanks once again for hanging out with us today on the beach, live stream. We're just chilling here, just having a good time. There's some clouds coming over here. Looks like rain's gonna come soon, so we better wrap it up. But thanks for hanging out with us. Talking Speedway. We'll talk more about other things going on, some other races and people. It's really fun. But thanks once again for hanging out with us, for commenting. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel. We talk lots of things. Speedway, we travel. We were in China last week or month. We do lots of weird stuff here on the channel and talk motorcycles a lot. We like that. But I don't talk only on motorcycles, but I talk about a lot of stuff. And I do a lot of quirky and wild stuff. And a few days ago, I had 6,000 views on my YouTube, which I'm very shocked. And I've had almost 60,000 views in the past 30 days. So I'm very pleased and happy, you know, that people are watching the shows and enjoying them, hopefully enjoying them. And so the channel is growing, and it's because of you. So please subscribe, like the show, appreciate you. And I don't really think I'm anything special. I'm just a dude, but I have a good time, and I'm kind of a quirky guy. So excuse me if I do something weird or offbeat. That's just me. I'm kind of a fun-loving guy. But thank you so much for hanging out with us today on the beach, talking Penhall, talking Speedway, talking Bruce's rise to fame and stardom. And thank you once again for hanging out, and we appreciate you. We're going to end this broadcast. Thanks for commenting. You guys are great. And we're going to go riding this Husqvarna. I ride bikes every day. I mean, I'm a major biker dude. A lot of my Speedway friends don't want to ride a motorcycle. And I'm like, how could you not want to ride? I'm on the beach here, and this is just awesome. I have like a beautiful experience every time. It's like a dream come true, riding my motorcycle on the beach. But thank you once again. Appreciate you. We're going to go ahead and we're going to see you again next time. Thank you so much. Take care.